Chosen one, stop scrolling. This is not background noise, and this is not a message meant for everyone. What you are hearing right now is a God's message, delivered in exact divine alignment, and it reached you because something in you was ready before your mind had time to interfere. That sudden pause you felt, that quiet pull, that inner knowing that whispered, "This is about me," that is spiritual awakening activating in real time. This video is about why you were called, why isolation followed you, and what God was preparing in silence while you thought nothing was happening. Stay with this, because what you are about to understand will completely change how you see your past and what you are stepping into next. You are not imagining this moment, and you are not reading too much into it. A chosen one does not encounter messages like this by accident. They are drawn by recognition. Before you had language for it, your soul already knew that recognition you feel is not emotion. It is remembrance. And this video exists to reveal why your path was different, why separation was necessary, and why God is now bringing revelation at this exact moment. Do not leave early, because if this message found you, it is because what you carry is about to be activated, and missing the end would mean missing what this was truly sent to awaken. This God's message did not reach everyone. It was never meant to. It reached you because your spirit was ready to hear what your mind may have resisted before. There were seasons when you would have dismissed this, times when you were too distracted, too wounded, too loud inside to receive it. But now, after everything you've been through, after the silence, after the separation, after the questions that never had answers, here you are. That alone tells you something has shifted. You have walked through seasons that did not make sense while you were in them. Seasons of isolation you did not choose. Moments when you felt set apart without explanation. You tried to fit in, tried to stay connected, tried to remain understood, yet life kept pulling you back into spaces of aloneness. That was not an accident. That was not punishment. That was not rejection. That was the beginning of your divine calling and chosen one path, even if you didn't have language for it yet. A chosen one is rarely introduced to their calling with comfort. The calling begins with separation, because what you carry cannot be shaped in noise. God does not reveal everything at once. He prepares first, and preparation often looks like isolation before it looks like purpose. What felt like being left out was actually being set aside. What felt like loss was actually alignment rearranging your life. If something in you is responding right now, if your chest feels tight or calm at the same time, if you feel seen in a way you couldn't explain to anyone else, acknowledge it. That is spiritual awakening. And if you feel aligned with this truth, comment 777 now. Not for me, but as a personal marker that your spirit heard what your mind is still catching up to. This message will change how you understand your past seasons, not someday, now. The confusion, the loneliness, the quiet endurance, the strength you had to develop without applause, all of it will begin to reorganize in your understanding. You were not wandering, you were being guided. You were not forgotten. You were being prepared, and you were never alone, even when it felt that way. There is a war that chosen ones face that is rarely spoken about. Not a physical war, but a spiritual one. A war against distraction, against self-doubt, against the pressure to dim your light just to belong. You felt it every time you tried to be smaller, so others would be comfortable. Every time you questioned why life felt heavier for you than for others. Every time you sensed there was more to you, but couldn't access it yet. That war is real. And the fact that you are still here means it did not win. Your light is necessary. Not optional. Not replaceable. Necessary. That is why it was protected. That is why it was hidden for a time. That is why God allowed distance between you and people who could not see it, honor it, or handle it. This God's message is not here to flatter you. It is here to remind you, to awaken you, to realign you with what you already carry. Circle back to the beginning and let this truth settle fully. This is a message from God. You are not imagining it. You were called. The war you fought internally was real. The isolation you endured had meaning, and the light you carry matters enough to be protected before it is revealed. You did not survive by accident. You endured because something in you is needed next. If this touched your soul, if something inside you stood up and said, "I know this," comment 111. Because you know it now, even if you always did deep down, you were called. The painful question, why did I have to be alone? There is a question that returns in the quiet moments, a question the chosen one has carried through seasons of silence, disappointment, and unanswered prayers. Why did I have to be alone? Not just physically alone, but emotionally unseen, spiritually misunderstood, and deeply disconnected, even when surrounded by people. This question did not come from weakness. It came from endurance. It rose from nights where you tried to make sense of your path, and days where you wondered what was wrong with you for feeling so different. Let this be said clearly, without softness and without delay. This is a God's message. You are not imagining the weight of what you felt. You are not exaggerating the loneliness, and you are not broken for asking this question. A chosen one feels isolation more deeply because they feel everything more deeply. What you experienced was real, and it deserves truth, not dismissal. Divine isolation is one of the most misunderstood experiences on the spiritual path. It often arrives disguised as rejection. Friends drift away. Conversations no longer satisfy. Environments that once felt familiar begin to feel suffocating. You try to explain what's happening inside you, but the words don't land. People hear you, but they don't understand you. Over time, you stop explaining, not because you have nothing to say, but because no one seems able to receive it. This is where shame quietly tries to enter. You start asking yourself if you are too much, too sensitive, too intense, or too different. You replay conversations, relationships, and decisions, wondering if you caused this distance. You search for flaws in yourself because it feels easier than accepting that something larger is at work. But hear this truth without resistance. Divine isolation is not a reflection of your worth. It is a response to your calling. The chosen one often feels unseen, not because they lack value, but because they carry depth that surface-level spaces cannot recognize. You were not ignored because you were insignificant. You were set apart because what you carry could not be handled casually. God does not place precious things in crowded, careless environments. He removes them, protects them, covers them until the time is right. There was quiet grief in this season. Grief for friendships that faded without explanation. Grief for versions of life you thought you would have by now. Grief for the ease you watched others experience while you struggled inwardly. And perhaps the hardest grief of all was not knowing why it was happening. Pain without explanation is heavy, but pain with purpose transforms everything. This is where the reframing begins. Divine isolation is not punishment. It is protection. It is not abandonment. It is alignment. It is not a sign that you failed. It is a signal that something in you required refinement. Preparation often looks like loss before it looks like clarity. Silence before instruction. Distance before direction. A chosen one is separated before they are sent. This is a pattern, not an exception. The isolation trained you to sit with yourself without distraction. It exposed your fears, stripped away borrowed identities, and forced you to confront who you are without validation. That process is uncomfortable, and that discomfort does not mean something went wrong. It means something real was happening. Circle back to the beginning and ground yourself in this truth again. This is a message from God. You are not imagining what you felt. You were called, and calling always disrupts comfort before it establishes purpose. The war you fought internally was real. The confusion was real. The loneliness was real. And the fact that you endured it means something in you was strong enough to be prepared in private. Your light is necessary. That is why it was shielded. That is why certain connections could not continue. That is why you could not stay where you were shrinking. God does not isolate to destroy. He isolates to preserve. And what was preserved in you will soon make sense. Let this section end where it must, not in sadness but in strength. You were never forgotten in your isolation. You were never overlooked. You were being shaped where no one could interfere. If this truth touches your soul, if something inside you exhales and says, "So that's why," comment 111. Because you know it now. You were called. Divine isolation was not rejection, it was protection. Return again to the beginning, because this truth must be anchored deeply before it can be fully received. This is a message from God. You are not imagining what happened to you. You were not misreading the signs. You were called, and calling always comes with separation before it comes with visibility. The war you endured was real, and the reason it intensified around you is because your light is necessary. What felt like rejection was never about pushing you away. It was about pulling you out. Divine isolation is not random, and it is not cruel. It is precise. God removes the chosen one from noise because noise interferes with clarity. He removes them from distraction because distraction delays readiness. And he removes them from misaligned relationships because not everyone who has access to you has permission to shape you. This is not punishment. This is spiritual intelligence at work. There are environments that dull discernment. There are relationships that slowly teach you to ignore your intuition. There are conversations that pull you away from your inner knowing and train you to doubt yourself. You did not imagine how tired you felt in certain spaces. That exhaustion was not social anxiety or weakness. It was your spirit signaling misalignment. Divine isolation stepped in where explanations could not. During spiritual preparation, sensitivity matters. A chosen one feels things deeply because they are meant to perceive what others miss. But that sensitivity cannot survive constant exposure to chaos, envy, shallow connection, or unhealed influence. So God intervenes. He quiets the surroundings. He thins the circle. He creates distance, not because you are fragile, but because what you carry is valuable. Understand this clearly. Separation happened because of what you carry, not because of what you lack. Weakness is not protected. Strength is. Potential is. Calling is. If you were ordinary, you could have stayed where you were. If your purpose was small, the pressure would have been lighter. But you were entrusted with something that required refinement before release. Certain people could not walk with you into what you are becoming because they were only equipped for who you were. That does not make them evil, and it does not make you superior. It makes the assignment different. Some environments would have diluted your clarity. Some relationships would have normalized your doubt. Some influences would have damaged your ability to hear God's voice clearly. So divine isolation intervened. This is the moment where things begin to click internally. The confusion starts to reorganize. The memories shift meaning. You begin to see that the silence trained you, the distance sharpened you, The loneliness forced you to develop an inner anchor instead of external approval. That is spiritual preparation. Quiet, uncomfortable, and powerful. A chosen one is not formed in crowds. They are formed in spaces where they can no longer perform, pretend, or borrow identity. Isolation removes the masks. It exposes dependency. It confronts fear. And when you survive that process, you emerge with discernment that cannot be easily shaken. That discernment is part of your calling. Circle back again and ground yourself in this truth. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the reason your life unfolded the way it did. You were called, and calling disrupts before it establishes. The war against your confidence, your belonging, your sense of place was real because your light threatened what could not control it. Your light is necessary enough to be protected before it is revealed, necessary enough to be removed from hands that would mishandle it, necessary enough to be prepared in private, where ego could not interfere, and where humility could grow without applause. What you survived did not weaken you, it refined you. What you lost did not delay you, it cleared you. And what you endured in isolation did not disqualify you, it positioned you. Divine isolation was never rejection, it was protection working quietly, deliberately, and faithfully on your behalf. Let this section end not in pain, but in power. You were never pushed aside. You were set apart. If this truth touched your soul, if something inside you finally connected the dots, comment 111, because you know it now, without needing permission or proof. You were called. What God was building in you while you felt alone. Circle back to the beginning and anchor yourself here before going any further. This is a message from God. You are not imagining what took place in you during those quiet, hidden seasons. You were called. And what you experienced was not emptiness, it was construction. The war you felt inside was real, because something valuable was being formed, and your light is necessary enough to be shaped with intention. While you felt alone, God was not absent. He was precise. Isolation was the environment where transformation could happen without interruption, away from opinions, expectations, and constant feedback. Your inner world began to change. At first, it was subtle. You became more aware of what drained you, more sensitive to what felt off, less willing to ignore your intuition just to keep peace. That was discernment being activated. Discernment does not arrive loudly. It grows quietly through observation, disappointment, and reflection. During isolation, you learn to read energy instead of words. You learned that not every smile means alignment, and not every invitation means access. This was not suspicion. This was clarity, and clarity is one of the first signs of spiritual awakening. Your emotional strength deepened as well. You learned how to sit with discomfort without running from it. You learned how to feel loneliness without letting it define you. You learned how to survive unanswered questions without collapsing into despair. That is emotional maturity, and it cannot be taught through comfort. It is earned through endurance. While others were distracted, you were being fortified. Spiritual strength was also being built, though you may not have recognized it at the time. Prayer became less about asking and more about listening. Silence stopped feeling empty and started feeling full. You noticed that clarity came when you were still, not when you were busy. This is how spiritual awakening often unfolds, not in crowds, not in applause, but in quiet moments where truth has room to rise. God uses silence to retrain hearing. When noise is removed, sensitivity returns. During your isolation, your inner voice grew stronger because it was no longer competing with everyone else's opinions. You stopped outsourcing your sense of direction. You began trusting what you felt, instead of constantly asking others to confirm it. That is spiritual preparation, even when it feels like nothing is happening. But something was happening. Your identity was being stripped down to what was real. Titles, roles, and external validation lost their power over you. You began to see yourself apart from who others needed you to be. That process can feel like loss, but it is actually freedom. God does not reveal purpose until identity is stable enough to carry it. This is why isolation is active preparation, not passive waiting. Waiting implies delay. Preparation implies intention. Every moment you spent questioning, reflecting, and recalibrating was shaping your capacity. You were being trained to carry God's revelation without distortion. Revelation given too early can confuse. Power given too soon can corrupt. So refinement comes first. You became clearer about your boundaries, clearer about your values, clearer about what you will no longer tolerate. That clarity did not make you harder. It made you truer, and truth attracts alignment while repelling what cannot stay. This is why certain connections naturally fell away without drama. They were no longer compatible with who you were becoming. God's revelation does not arrive in chaos. It arrives in readiness, and readiness requires refinement. The isolation refined your motives. It exposed hidden fears. It softened your ego. It strengthened your resolve. When God reveals the next step, you will not confuse it with fantasy or fear. You will recognize it because your inner world is now calibrated to truth. Circle back once more and let this settle deeply. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the changes that took place inside you. You were called, and the war that tried to exhaust you was real, because what you carry matters. Your light is necessary, and it had to be protected, trained, and strengthened before it could be released. You were not idle in isolation. You were becoming. You were not forgotten. You were being refined. And what God built in you during those unseen seasons will soon make sense in ways that bring peace instead of confusion. Let this end with power, not doubt. You are not behind. You are not late. You are prepared. If this touched your soul, if something inside you feels steady and affirmed, comment 111, because you know it now without needing proof. You were called. God sits revelation. Why you could not take everyone with you. Circle back to the beginning and ground yourself here, because this truth requires steadiness to receive. This is a message from God. You are not imagining what unfolded in your life. You were called, and the war you endured was real, because your light is necessary. What you are about to understand is not meant to wound you. It is meant to free you. Here is God's revelation, spoken plainly and without apology. You could not take everyone with you because the next level of your life requires purity of intention, clarity of identity, and freedom from external influence. Not everyone in your past was aligned with who you are becoming. Some people were meant for a previous season only, even if they mattered deeply to you. This realization often comes with grief. Real grief, the kind that does not come from hatred or betrayal, but from love mixed with understanding. You cared, you tried, you held on longer than you should have, not because you were weak, but because your heart was sincere. Let it be said clearly, releasing people does not mean you failed them. It means the assignment changed. Divine isolation continues its work here, not by removing people abruptly, but by revealing misalignment gently over time. Conversations no longer flow, values no longer match. Growth creates distance that effort cannot repair, and this is where guilt often enters. You start wondering if you abandoned them, if you became selfish, if you changed too much. But growth is not betrayal. Evolution is not arrogance. And obedience to your calling is not cruelty. This separation was never about superiority. It was about assignment. A divine calling and chosen one path demands focus. It demands integrity. It demands an inner authority that cannot be negotiated away to keep others comfortable. Some people would have required you to shrink, to compromise, to dilute your discernment just to maintain access. That cost was too high. God's revelation is not that others were bad. It is that they were not meant to go further. Some were companions for survival, not destiny. Some helped you through pain, but were not equipped for purpose. Some loved the version of you that needed help, but would not know how to honor the version of you that carries authority. This truth can feel sobering because it asks you to release without bitterness and to move forward without dragging guilt behind you. You are not responsible for carrying people into seasons they are not prepared for. You are responsible for honoring what God placed in you. And honoring that calling sometimes requires walking alone until alignment replaces familiarity. There is a purity that is required for what comes next. Purity of intention means your motives are no longer mixed with fear of abandonment. Clarity of identity means you no longer define yourself by who stays or who leaves. Freedom from external influence means your decisions are guided by truth, not approval. This level cannot be reached while constantly negotiating your direction with people who are comfortable in the old season. This is why divine isolation did not end immediately. It needed to complete its work. It needed to break emotional dependency. It needed to strengthen your inner voice. It needed to teach you that obedience sometimes looks like disappointment to others. That lesson is not gentle, but it is necessary. Release does not mean forgetting. It does not mean erasing memories or denying love. It means accepting that access has limits, that timing matters, that not everyone who walked with you can walk into what you are carrying now, and that truth does not diminish your compassion. It deepens your wisdom. God's revelation here is empowerment, not loss. You are not walking away empty-handed. You are walking forward aligned with your purpose, aligned with your calling, aligned with the version of you that no longer needs permission to grow. The loneliness you feared was temporary. The alignment you are entering is lasting. Circle back again and let this truth anchor you. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the reason relationships shifted, faded, or fell away. You were called, and calling requires courage. The war you fought internally was real because your light is necessary, and it could not be entrusted to just anyone. You did not lose people because you were unworthy. You were separated because the assignment is precise. And what is coming next will require the version of you that survived isolation, refinement, and release without becoming bitter. End this section not with regret, but with strength. You are allowed to move forward without dragging the past behind you. You are allowed to honor what was while embracing what is. And you are allowed to answer the call, even if it means walking alone for a while longer. If this touched your soul, if something inside you finally released guilt and stepped into clarity, comment 111. Because you know it now without fear or apology. You were called. Stepping out of isolation into assignment, circle back to the beginning one final time, because this truth must land with certainty, not hesitation. This is a God's message. You are not imagining what you feel right now. You were called. The war you fought internally was real, and it was intense because your light is necessary. And now, something has shifted. Isolation is ending because preparation is complete. There comes a moment when separation no longer serves its purpose, when silence has taught everything it needed to teach, when refinement has done its work. That moment is now. You are not stepping forward because you feel ready by human standards. You are stepping forward because you are aligned by divine standards. And alignment is stronger than confidence. For a long time you questioned yourself. You questioned your timing, your decisions, your pace. You wondered if you were behind, if you misunderstood God, if you waited too long or moved too slowly. Hear this clearly. You were never delayed. You were being positioned. And now the same discernment that was sharpened in isolation is meant to guide you outward. Trust what you know now. Trust how clearly you can sense what is right and what is not. Trust how quickly misalignment reveals itself to you. That clarity did not come from overthinking. It came from spiritual preparation. You earned it in silence. You earned it in solitude. You earned it when you had no one to lean on but God and the truth within you. God does not isolate without purpose, and He does not prepare without release. Every season of hiding leads to a season of movement. Every season of quiet leads to a season of expression. What felt like being set aside was actually being set up. And now the assignment is calling you forward. This does not mean everything will suddenly be easy. It means you will no longer walk confused. Alignment will replace loneliness. Discernment will replace doubt. Peace will replace the constant questioning that once followed you everywhere. You will recognize where you belong, not by force, but by resonance. What is meant for you will meet you without struggle. You are stepping into a phase where your presence will no longer feel out of place, where your voice will no longer feel too much, where your boundaries will no longer require explanation. This is what happens when a chosen one finally moves from isolation into assignment. You stop shrinking. You stop apologizing. You stop negotiating your calling. God's revelation is not just about understanding the past. It is about empowering the future. You were shown why you had to be alone so you would not carry fear into what comes next. So you would not attach yourself to what cannot go with you. So you would walk forward grounded, clear, and internally anchored. Speak directly to your future now and hear this truth settle. You will not miss what is meant for you. You will not walk into the wrong spaces unknowingly. You will not be easily distracted or easily influenced. The version of you that emerges from this season is discerning, steady, and spiritually awake. Circle back one last time and let it seal within you. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the shift you feel. You were called. The war was real because the assignment is real. Your light is necessary, and it is no longer meant to be hidden. If you feel aligned with this moment, if something inside you feels settled and activated, comment 777 now. Let it mark the end of preparation and the beginning of movement. And if this touched your soul, if you know without doubt that this message spoke directly to you, comment 111, because you know it now, deeper than ever before. You were called.